Hello, I'm Professor Lieu, here with art prof teaching artist Jordan McCracken-Foster. Welcome to our video where we critique your artwork. Today we are looking at three pieces by one artist, Mariana Duarte Santos. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your name. Mariana is from Portugal, and we have this piece, which is an oil on canvas called Checkmate. We have two linoleum block prints. This one, which is called When I Talk, You Listen. We have a third one, which is called Rat Race. If you would like to grow as an artist, but you can't afford an art class, or if you're trapped indoors like almost everybody on the planet right now, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof, critiques and tutorials. All right, let's get started with the two linoleum block prints. This first piece that we're going to talk about is called Rat Race. And Jordan, I think it makes sense for us to talk about Rat Race and the second one together because they are thematically related and they are also done in the same material. So before we get into Mariana's artist statement, Jordan, what's your first impression of these two pieces?
I love them both. If I had to pick a favorite, I would say Rat Race for its complexity and for the technical style and the way it's done, the mark making. I think it's really, really strong. The anatomy's all there, and despite like all the individual like tiny marks that are being made, it's still very clear what is being communicated. So yeah, I love these two pieces.
Oh, wow, we have so many people in the chat. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Let's see. Oh, Mariana's in the chat. Wonderful. I'm so happy that you're here. We will definitely be asking you questions. And feel free to let us know anything if you got questions for us, Mariana, about your piece. All right. The first thing I want to say, I agree with you, Jordan, but the printmaking nerd in me has come out, and I'm going to use all my nerdy printmaking skills tonight. The thing that's
Do it.
nuts to me, guys, those of you who are watching, and Jordan, you can tell me if this is accurate. Doesn't this look like a pen drawing to you?
Yes. Actually, there was a part of me that kind of forgot that it wasn't a pen drawing because that's what I'm just so used to seeing that. So yeah, I agree with you there.
Guys, this is carved. This is done with knives. Okay, this is not a pen drawing. And if you guys go down to the video description below and you read Mariana's artist statement, I believe she says that this piece, Rat Race, measures 55 inches by 67 inches. In fact, it was so big that it was printed using a steamroller. I'm like, Mariana, how do you do that? That's just crazy. I mean, I think that's really extraordinary. I don't know where you got that steamroller, but oh my god, that is so ambitious. I bet you anything I'm missing like 80% of what's in the real print. And it makes me sad because prints really do look very different in real life because you can see the actual impression into the paper. So I just want everybody to just be in awe of that printmaking technique because that really is astounding if you guys think about it. Now, Jordan, you said you like Rat Race better than the other one. Why do you think that is? Do you think that there's something about the second piece titled When I Talk, You Listen that maybe isn't working as well?
Well, for one, the composition and Rat Race is just more dynamic. There's more things to look at. And diagonals, making the composition way more interesting. So, like the main character who's looking down at his book, I just love just the way the hat is angled, you know, and it's creating all these different directions for us to look at. Whereas in the piece When I Talk, You Listen, it feels very much like one, two, three, and it feels like I'm just looking at three columns, and the characters are very similar in terms of the way they're, you know, they're straight on figures. No one's turning slightly to the side or anything like that. And I also don't feel like the depth is as well explored in this one between the figures as it is in Rat Race.
Do you feel like this piece, When I Talk, You Listen, it just feels more flat?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think that the part that really particularly makes it feel flat is the relationship between the character in the middle and the character on the right. I assume it's a woman. It just feels it feels particularly flat there. With the one in the background, I don't feel it as much, but here it kind of glares at me. So yeah.
You know what else I notice is that in this piece, when I talk, you listen, the faces are very visible. I mean, yes, the figure on the right, you can't see anything, but the person in the middle and the person on the left, I really know what their faces look like. Whereas I feel like in Rat Race, you just get little glimpses of the faces, even if faces that are complete are somewhat tilted downwards. And so there's something about that lack of information, that things are just not as clearly spelled out in Rat Race, that I appreciate. I feel like the story doesn't reveal itself quite as quickly as it does in this piece. Like this piece to me feels more like it's about facial recognition, whereas this one I just think about, wow, hustle and bustle, all the movement, people packed in, and I don't think about individuals as much as I think about just a group of people together, and that's fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that one of the things there's this meme going around where you can apply to almost anything, but there's certain images you see, and then people write, "I can hear this image," and because it maybe is associated with a particular character or something. And I feel that way with this, where I feel like I know the environment this character is in, or at least something very similar to it. So I love it for that aspect.
Well, and let's go down to the artist statement as well, because Mariana's inspiration for these two linoleum block prints, they're based on still frames from 50s and 60s TV shows like The Twilight Zone, Hitchcock Presents, The Hitchcock Hour, Tales of Tomorrow, and The Outer Limits. And she explains that she's trying to renew or reanimate the old and poignant images as still worthy of life by isolating them and presenting them in a new way, and that they're trying to show the beauty of the images themselves as opposed to simply a portrait of a celebrity. What do you think about that as an idea, Jordan? Do you think that's working for these pieces? Does that come across? Does it not matter?
Yeah, I think taking reference from like the Twilight Zone, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way, is a great place to go because it's more like if you recognize the faces for one, it's more of an Easter egg, and it's not distracting. Whereas if I were to look at this and I clearly see like Kevin Hart or Dwayne Johnson in here, it's like, okay, what's he doing in there? That doesn't feel authentic. So I think that taking that direction, that approach is actually a very clever spin on the idea of doing like a celebrity portrait.
Oh, wow. So Mariana's saying that she heard of a place that had a really big press. I started this huge one, then found out they were charging 200 euros a day for the use on the press. So I thought of a steamroller. And Mariana says, I talked with my grandmother about it. Turns out her brother is part of a company that rents construction machines. He had a steamroller, which he let me use for free. Oh my goodness. I guess you need to make sure you are related to the right people in order to be a successful printmaker. That's really incredible. Let's see. Nathan is saying they do a very good job to disguise the text on the newspaper. My eyes immediately don't go there. Yeah, Jordan, what's your take on the newspaper? Because some of it you can read, like this one here, I can read 7 star. It says official. Do you think that matters?
I mean, I would I would say it doesn't matter in the sense that it doesn't distract me, but I do think it's cool to add in because it's so easy to just put a random line or just little digits, make it look like Morse code or something. Um, and so I think it actually adds to the realism of this to feel more authentic. Oh, someone's actually reading this. I think it helps make it come more to life.
Enoch is saying the hatching feels underdone in When I Talk You Listen. It feels less cohesive than the first one, and the depth of the image is lost due to the lack of shading and contrast in styles of hatching. Yeah, I would say the hatching to me actually does feel very different in When I Talk You Listen, because the hatching, it there's less of it, but also I feel like the hatching is shorter. Like the strokes are not quite as long as they are. And I think that gives it somewhat of a feeling of fragmentation, which I think you're not having that issue in Rat Race. I mean, I feel like one figure leads to another, and I don't have any reason at any point to stop moving in the piece. So as a composition, it's extremely dynamic. So I'm just thrilled. I mean, Mariana, you must have just a workhorse of a work ethic because, guys, this stuff takes so long to make. Tell me in the chat if you have ever carved a linoleum block before and what that experience was like. And if you think you could pull off a 50-inch tall linoleum print. And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we do have a tutorial on linoleum block printmaking. You guys can check this out later if you're not familiar with the process. But printmaking is very exciting because to me, it's a very sculptural process, and yet it's flat. So there's something really wonderful about that. And if linoleum block printmaking intimidates you, you can try rubber stamps because rubber stamps, it's a similar idea, but you can make them really small. It's a lot cheaper, a lot easier to carve. So definitely check some of these out because I think that printmaking is something I really wish people would do more of. Like, Jordan, have you ever done printmaking before?
Yeah, and it nearly killed me because it took me so long to understand the process that I was like, I would just rather draw this like on paper. But that's just me. Part of it had to do with the pressure of other classes and stuff, but it was really cool.
Let's see. We've got a lot of people who've done printmaking before. Looks is saying can't imagine the hand cramps. Ashley did one that was 8x5. And Nathan's saying it's so hard and so meticulous. Doing a small one, maybe 1 foot by 1 foot in art school took me hours. Absolutely. And by the way, Mariana, I think you should take a look at Lucian Freud's etchings because he has a very almost sparse way of doing etching, but they do have a very painterly look to them. And I think Lucian Freud's a really good example because, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, Mariana also paints. And Lucian Freud really is somebody who I think people think about him as a painter first and as a printmaker second. But I love his treatment of flesh. And I think, Mariana, that might be something you really want to take a look at because I feel like if we go back to this piece, When I Talk, You Listen, I feel like what I'm missing is that there isn't a big distinction between what's fleshy and what's bony. I feel like it's all the same. I mean, Jordan, you're a big anatomy nerd like me. Why do you think that matters? That distinction between bone and flesh and fat and all that?
It's important just to tell your story and understand who the character is. If you're, let's say someone if you're trying to make someone look muscular, but instead you end up making them look fat by the way you're rendering it, then that could cause a lot of issues. Like let's say you're drawing Superman. Superman's generally not seen as overweight, so so that can be very important for your storytelling and just in clarity. So yeah, getting the planes, understanding all those different things, playing anatomy, structure, very, very important.
So, Mariana, I would say, because we've been gushing about Rat Race for so much, if there's anything I would suggest to improve, would be to push your sense of atmospheric perspective. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we got you covered. We have an atmospheric perspective video. It's called Why Your Paintings Look So Flat. Check it out. It's in our Art Fundamentals playlist. But basically, what I think you could do, Mariana, with this piece, the figures that are in the back, push them back a little bit more. Because you have this incredible technique, but it's almost like, the best way I can put it, it's like you have a superpower. And you can't use your superpower all the time. You have to use it in small quantities and moderation. And so the thing is, just because you can make such beautiful, intricate lines doesn't mean you should always make beautiful, intricate lines. There could be some areas of this print that maybe are just very simple and don't have a lot of detail, because it kills me to tell you that you should do a little less of this amazing work. That just is weird for me to make a comment like that. But I sort of feel like that's what it is when somebody's this good at technique. It's like, how do you control yourself? Does that make any sense, Jordan, or am I a crazy person?
No, it makes total sense. And, whenever I think about things that are flat or things that need more depth, I think of Where's Waldo books, actually, because that book is intentionally put together so that you're looking for the character Waldo for a long period of time. And everything is done with the same reds and the same greens and the same line weights so that you do that. But in a piece like this, you want to have varying line weight, varying, um, you know, uh, types of values and all those things to help push things back into the distance.
So the thing is, Mariana, you might find yourself in a situation where you have something beautifully drawn, but maybe you gotta like fill it in with some shading. So you actually have to give up some of your technique. Because I think for some people, if they don't have a lot of skill and expertise in a certain area, they have a different set of skills. And so I try to get them to hone them in a different way. For you, it's like, how do we keep you from using it all the time? Because there should be, I think, some areas that I think could be more quiet. Like this detail we're looking at. Does everybody see the lower left hand corner? It's like all black, and then it slowly gets lighter and lighter. Like, what if that figure on the far left was almost a silhouette, just like a whisper of a shadow? Right now, it has articulation in the hat. You can see the texture in the jacket. Maybe you don't need all that. And so maybe, Mariana, it's like, how much can you say without having to use all your words? Maybe you can cut back on a few of those words and be a little bit more succinct about that. Let's see. Mariana is saying, I must try on my next piece to use thinner lines on the background figure. Totally get your point. And Pennington's saying, seems that Rat Race, mainly in grays and not in black and white like the other one, I think this makes Rat Race more impressive because everything is pronounced without using the full value scale. Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm a huge fan, Mariana. I mean, this is one of those pieces. I don't know if you feel this way, Jordan, where you're just like scraping the bottom of the barrel to like find something to critique because it's like really impressive. But that's what I would work on is that spatial relationship, like really creating a sense of that. Okay, let's go back to the third piece, which is an oil painting called Checkmate. Jordan, what's your first impression? Because although this definitely has some similarities to the other prints, this is a really different painting.
Mhm. I really like this one as well. I think that all the time taken into putting the detail in the wood paneling on the chessboard, the lines on the shirt and the wrinkles, I think those are all really, really well done. But I will say also suffers from the same thing as Rat Race, where the depth could be pushed a little bit further with the background. But it's such a minor thing considering all the great stuff about it, you know?
Well, if you guys go down to the video description below, definitely read Mariana's artist statement because, first of all, Mariana, you're really good at writing. I have to say that so much of the time we give people a hard time here about their artist statements and how they don't match the painting and stuff like that. But yours is really eloquently written. But there's a beautiful story here about Mariana's grandfather, Alicio. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but he has Alzheimer's, and this is about Mariana playing a chess game with him and about him trying to make sure that he's focusing on the game. Anyway, you guys should just read it because I'm not going to do a very good job of describing it. But I wonder, Jordan, do you think that comes across in this piece? Because I'm not so sure if I didn't have the background of the artist statement that I would know this is somebody with dementia, or does it not matter? Do we not care about that in the actual painting, or what?
Yeah, so I saw the piece first and then I read the artist statement and I never would have connected those two stories personally. That said, it is a great story and it is a great painting, but I don't know if this is image to describe uh, his condition of having dementia. And I don't know if that's necessarily what you want to focus on for this painting or if that's just some background you want us to know about your grandfather. So yeah.
I mean, my feeling is that, again, I mean, your painting technique is, oh, breathtaking, incredible strokes and beautiful work in all the details. But I feel that it's a very literal depiction of the scene because you talk about, okay, I'm playing this game with him, But there's so many things that you talk about in the statement that just don't get addressed in the painting. And so I wonder, maybe this needs to be an image that talks about something that feels a little bit more sequential, because the way the painting is done right now, it's a single scene. It's like, I feel like I am playing chess with your grandfather and he's really focusing, and so I'm really in the moment. But there's all these things you talk about at the very end, where you said the reaction of your grandmother. So let's see, you said you wanted to see if you could still play chess. Your grandmother was a little skeptical, went on doing her own thing, but every time she came into the room, he had taken more and more of my pieces. She stayed then till the end of the game and he won fair and square. And so I guess that's what I really wish was there, was the presence of your grandmother, because she's such a big part of this scene and relationship, and her not being there, I feel like I'm missing a lot of what makes this story unique. So, Jordan, do you have any ideas about how to do that? I mean, we're really talking about making a completely different painting, but I'm just trying to toss open some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, there were several stories in there that I think could potentially be used to illustrate something, but something with the grandma maybe helping him out in some way, or maybe there's a way you can sort of allude to his condition where he just is forgetful, or maybe there's a way you can put an expression on someone else's face that maybe is confused. I don't know, it's challenging to do it, and just by painting it rather than like something like film or a comic strip or whatever. But I think it can be done. I think it would definitely help us recognize all the things you're trying to say about him as an individual.
Well, actually, somebody just brought up in the chat, I think Dylan just said they're not sure about how they feel about the white beam on the right, kind of distracts from the orange path. I feel like the missed opportunity here is actually in the environment. Because, like, Jordan, if you didn't know anything about Mariana, where would you guess this is? Like, if you had to pick a country or a time period, do you have an idea of what that is, or do you not know?
I mean, I would definitely say modern times, or at least within the last 20 to 30 years, by his clothes and his watch and everything. But as far as country or anything, I wouldn't know.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
Mariana, I think that's where you need to pull out your storytelling skills more, because when I look at it, I would have no idea what culture he's from. And little things like those framed paintings on the wall, those have a lot of potential. Like, Jordan, what's something Mariana could have done with those frame paintings?
Um, one you could have put more of them, or um, you could have maybe create a frame that was more symbolic of the culture, or maybe the paintings themselves could be reminiscent of something that's very popular. Like I remember one time I was over at a friend's house and he has a bunch of paintings from Dominican Republic in his house, and there's a very particular way that they paint over there that made it feel like, oh yeah, this is from this general area of the world. So I think that would probably really help in this situation.
Well, because, I mean, just to go back to Rat Race for a minute, like, just the hats alone say something about the time period. Because have you guys noticed this? People don't wear hats anymore. Like, when you watch those old fashioned TV shows, everyone's wearing a fedora. It's like that was what people wore. That really dates that time period. Now, in here, the shirt that the grandfather is wearing is sort of a typical generic looking shirt. Yes, we know this is not the 1600s, but it's pretty generic as far as that. And I feel like I just want more visual clues that say, okay, this is in Portugal, or this is the type of family this is in, because I don't know that I know a lot about him other than that he's an older person playing chess. I feel like the story gets a little bit hidden. Marianne is saying, narrative is something I've wanted to focus more on my paintings. I seem to rush into a painting and agree. I need to work more on those aspects. Phoebe P is saying, maybe you could have a painting of your grandmother on the wall in the background, or something that would reflect her image, like his watch or his glasses. Yeah, or like picture this. Like, Mariana, where is he? Is this like the dining room? Is this the living room? I feel that spaces really can tell a story. Because, Jordan, have you seen this, that a lot of people, when they want to tell a story, they think it's all in the character, but the background can say so much. I mean, have you seen that before where the background's actually telling more of the story than the character?
I'm guilty of that. I'm working on a project right now where I'm supposed to create characters, props, and environments. And I've done all the characters and props, but the environments I've kind of left to last. Yeah, I'm trying not to, be too mad at myself for that, but it's true. Environments really tell you what world they're in, and it may not be the most fun thing to do all the time, but it's completely necessary because you can't just have these people in a white background space or all the time. So,
Well, one of the things that Kat Huang, who is another teaching artist here at Art Prof, she said to think about a space like the space is a character itself. Because a lot of people do treat the background as an afterthought, but actually you can do a lot with the background. So I would think about that. And one thing you can consider, I think, would to be more intentional with your lighting because there is light in this piece for sure. I mean, you can see the lighting that's on the left side of his head. There's beautiful light and shadow on the shirt. But the thing is, the light doesn't really establish much of a mood. And I feel like lighting can really change the way you see a scene. So we have this tutorial here about lighting and painting. I know it's a picture of Michael Fassbender, but trust me, there's actual real art content in here. There's Michael Fassbender too, which is great. But in it, I talk about how lighting can really transform a scene depending on what type of feeling you want to express. Like this picture of Michael, he's like proposing to Penelope Cruz in this movie, and it's like candlelight and dinner, and it's like very romantic looking and stuff like that. But I feel like Mariana, like if you wanted to make this a very fun scene, I think you could, because I was reading your statement, Mariana, and I was sort of cackling a little bit the way you were saying your grandmother was so delighted, so surprised, and yet the image, he looks almost like frustrated in a way, but this seems sort of like a light, happy moment in what you're describing. I don't know. What do you think, Jordan? Based on the statement, what scene are you envisioning? A sad one, a happy one?
um, honestly, I'm honestly not quite sure. It doesn't really lead me in either direction. I mean, just because it's the title's Checkmate, I would imagine it's sad because he's disappointed that he lost. But it does. But there's nothing. If I didn't know the title, there wouldn't be a whole lot of indication there. So maybe just making the lighting more dramatic, like making those shadows like really deep and much longer than they are currently, and that can tell a lot of the mood right there.
Although it's interesting you said that because in the statement, the grandfather won the game. So you actually have the opposite interpretation because it's called Checkmate, but I think he won the game, right, Mariana? Isn't that true?
It, hmm. Okay,
Anyway,
so
that's something to consider. What about the color, Jordan? Because it's a pretty muted color scheme. Do you think that's working?
uh, working fine. I'm attracted to colors that are very saturated, so I think an opportunity for that could be in the green on the chessboard, making that just shine a little bit more because it clearly is a very decorated chessboard. It's not your average one that's just made of plastic. It looks like someone really crafted this and spent a lot of time building it. And so I think doing something like that would be great. And I don't know, like maybe saturating some of the blues in the shirt a little bit more. It just feels a little washed out to me overall. And I feel like we could use a couple more punches of color, at the very least, maybe even in the skin, just to give it some more life, give it some more pink. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I do get the feeling that the almost washed out look, it feels intentional to me. It doesn't look like somebody who, oh, Marion, I can't do color. This is what she ended up doing. It seems like that was the intent, but I do think you could use saturated colors maybe to call attention to something. For example, picture if the chess pieces, maybe a couple of them are really bright for some reason. Maybe it's the ones that he took from you, or I don't know. I feel like you could sneak in more little stories into this. So even if we don't get every single little story, it's a little bit more than just here's what it looked like. Because the thing is, Mariana, this painting is fairly stylized. Like, it's not hyper realistic looking necessarily, but it does feel like a pretty, what's the word, accurate description of what it was. And I guess I want you to get beyond that because technique is not a problem for you, Mariana. Like, you need to work on the storytelling and the narrative part of it. You will be fine. Like, we do not really need to talk to you about technique, but we do need to talk to you about storytelling. And Jordan, what do you think is the challenge of storytelling?
With storytelling, I think it actually requires a lot more thinking. Because with technical skill, it just, really comes from just doing it a bunch and just figuring it out. But when you start thinking about how the story is going to be conveyed and the color and the light and the composition and there's suddenly so many things to think about, it can become overwhelming. And especially for someone who's brand new to it, I know it was for me certainly. And so for that reason, and it's also can be it's one of those things when you're making it, it can be easily overlooked, but it's the first thing that people think about when they see it. So so yeah, you just have to be really intentional about storytelling.
I mean, I think what's interesting is that we were very excited about your incredible linoleum block prints. But I'll tell you, Mariana, in terms of story, I think the story of your grandfather is incredibly powerful. I mean, I was so moved when I read the statement. And Rat Race is beautifully done, but the subject and the story to me is not remotely as interesting. And I do think it's hard to make artwork that's about something so personal, that's really about your family. It's so intimate. But I love those types of stories. I don't know, Jordan, between the two, the imagery from the TV shows and the grandfather story, which is one that you think maybe has more potential to go further?
Um, hmm, that's actually really tough because right now, there's something about Rat Race that still really appeals to me. As the way as it stands right now, I feel like I could picture that world and maybe what's going to happen next much more easily. But this one, with the grandfather and Checkmate, I think that there's a lot of potential there, but I'm just not seeing it reached yet. And so my decision is kind of shifting. Um, I know it's not a clear answer. It's probably the easy way out, but that's how I feel.
Well, I think the point we're trying to make, Mariana, is that you're a really versatile artist. And I think it's remarkable that you can do work that's very different, but also so technically accomplished. But I guess you have to think about, okay, well, what am I really after with these pieces? Like Rat Race to me feels more like you're illustrating a scene. Whereas I think that the image of the grandfather, it's much more emotionally invested, has the potential to be that way. So I think that's something you might want to think about. Marion is saying, I'm working on a portrait of my grandfather, trying to include more of an aspect of storytelling. I have her looking over old photos and writing in her quote diary. Oh, wow. So you are continuing work on this subject matter. That's fantastic. The other thing I would say, Mariana, is do some sketches, do a lot of brainstorming, and just do as many different versions of that as possible. Because what I find is people jump into the painting way too fast, and then they haven't really had time to work through the story. So I think just multiple scripts of that would be a good way to get going. I hope you guys will take some time and explore artprof.org because we have been adding all sorts of cool stuff for you guys. This new section called The Complete Guide to Teaching and Learning Art Online for all of us who are trapped in our homes, at least for the next little while. And we hope you will subscribe to our channel and join the Art Prof family. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters who keep us up and running. Thank you to all of you who participated in the chat. Thank you, Mariana, for sharing your artwork with us. We will see you guys next time. Stay safe. Bye.